The stories you are about to hear are real. They have been taken from the reels of Hollywood movies. The names have been changed to protect the identity of those films. This is not true crime. This is real crime scenes. Welcome to the first episode of Real Crime Scenes. I'm your host, Bubbawheat. The story you're about to hear is a crime that occurred in a movie. The names have been changed to keep the film's identity a secret, but I would love it if you would share your guesses with me on Threads or social media. The answer will also be revealed in our next episode, where my guest and I will discuss the movie and the crime that was committed. So for now, here is the case of Jackson Bradley's kidnapping. It should have been just a typical morning for the Bradley family. They had just spent the evening before at a local carnival having fun, riding rides, enjoying the East Coast fall weather. Carol Bradley was thinking about what she was going to do for her son's 13th birthday in a little over 3 weeks. Unfortunately for her, those plans would never come to pass, as she wouldn't end up seeing her son again for over 6 weeks. Something seemed off with Jackson when he rushed out of their home on the morning of September 12, 1987, in Cliffside Park, New Jersey, right across the river from Upper Manhattan. Carol thought he sounded like he was coming down with a cold, but at the time she didn't pay much attention, and assumed that he was just going next door to visit his best friend Pete. Just over an hour later, Carol was visited by an unidentified man who invaded her home, threatened her with intimate knowledge about her son, including his birth date and the name of his Little League team. Then he pulled down his pants, likely with the intent of exposing himself, when she noticed that the underwear he was wearing was the exact same underwear that her son wore. It was then that Carol grabbed a butcher knife from the knife block in her kitchen and began demanding to know where her son was. The man quickly pulled up his pants and ran out of the house without another word. She then called the police, who arrived on the scene quickly, but there was no sign of her attacker or her son. There were no obvious signs of a struggle in his room, and no fingerprints were found, other than those belonging to the Bradley family. The next 3 days were practically unbearable for Carol, with no leads and no trace of her son, when she receives a mysterious phone call. The first thing she hears is, "I just wanted you to know that Jackson is all right, and he's okay and everything." She asks him if he has her son, and he tells her that she will get her son back. He makes no demands during this call, but doesn't allow her to speak to her son directly. Instead, his only assurance that her son is okay is that he recalls the song that she used to sing to him when he was younger. But besides the lack of demands, the most unusual thing was that during the call, Carol threatened to go after the caller if he did anything to harm her son, and the caller's response wasn't angry or scared. He simply said, "Wow, thanks." The police did have the line tapped, but unfortunately the call wasn't long enough for them to identify where the call was coming from. You have to remember this was 1987. And despite that brief moment of hope, another 2 weeks go by with no leads, no calls, no progress. September becomes October, and the next sign of life arrives in her mailbox. It's a handwritten letter that looks similar to her son's writing. The letter reads, "Dear Mom and Dad, they said that I could write you and let you know I was okay. So far they're treating me fine. I got enough to eat and am perfectly safe. They say I'll get out of here in about a month. In the meantime, it's a lot like camp. I watch TV and even get outside once in a while. I know you miss me, but try not to worry. I think this experience might even be good for me. I love you very much, and I know I'll see you soon. Your son, Jackson. P.S. Give Rachel a kiss from her big brother." There was no return address on this letter, but the police determined that it was picked up from a New York post office. The letter offered a weak lead, but it also offered some amount of hope with the promise of Jackson's return in about a month. But during that entire month, Carol's mind reeled with the possibilities of what Jackson was enduring during those next 4 weeks. Right, and joining me is a detective that worked on the case. Thank you for speaking with me about this. And let me ask you, what did you think when you first heard about this case?
When I first received this case, I didn't know what to think of it. Looking at the evidence, there was very little to go on. Jackson just seemed to disappear off the face of the earth for several weeks. A number of bizarre claims that I don't even think should be repeated were apparently made by the kidnapper to the family, which leads me to believe that we're dealing with a very sick individual.
Yeah, I believe that I read that he had information about Jackson that normal people wouldn't have necessarily known. That did you think that he had surveillance on the family before the kidnapping?
He must have, because he, according to the family, the kidnapper had information that realistically was information that really only would have been known by Jackson and his parents. So I have to think that the kidnapper had been in a word, stalking Jackson for quite some time before actually snatching him.
And was there ever any discussion on what the motive of this kidnapping could have been? Were there any demands made on the parents?
There were no demands made on the parents that they ever made us aware of. So money or blackmail don't seem to have been a factor here. And certainly we weren't able to come up with anything in the family's history that would lead us to suspect that they had enemies that would do such a thing. The only motives we could ever figure out were some rather dark motives for abuse, which were, given the information that we were given by the family, thoroughly denied by the kidnapper himself.
Yeah, and I did read that when Jackson was returned, he was wearing adult-sized clothing. Was it thought to be the kidnapper's clothing? And was there any evidence of sexual abuse? Was there? I know this happened in the late '80s, so it was kind of early for DNA testing. But was there any sort of testing on the clothes?
Um, the clothes are a bit of a mystery because we have no concrete information on what the kidnapper looked like. Now, there is an interesting thing that happened around this time, which is that an adult man, probably late 20s to early 30s, seems to have appeared out of nowhere in New York at around the time of Jackson's apparent kidnapping. He took a job at a toy company and rented a room at a flop house and held down this job for about 6 weeks and lived at that place for about 6 weeks before again disappearing inexplicably. I don't know if the two things are connected, but given the description of this man, the clothes might have been his. They seem to be consistent in size, the sizes we got off the clothing, that with the descriptions we had of this man that we received from various coworkers and people who saw him around that area, the clothes themselves had no unusual. There were no bodily fluids, unusual bodily fluids on the clothing that would have suggested sexual abuse or sexual activity.
And do you have any theories on what happened to his kidnapper once Jackson was returned to his home?
I do not personally have any theories. It is as if this kidnapper disappeared off the face of the earth. We've tried cross-referencing this incident with other disappearances, kidnappings, child abuse incidents, child murder incidents, exploitation. We have not been able to come up with anything. Nothing that. So I wouldn't even begin to theorize what happened to the kidnapper.
All right. Well, thank you very much for talking with me today and joining me on this episode.
Thank you very much.
November 10th, 1987. It's now been over a month since Carol received a letter from Jackson. He had just turned 13, a mere days earlier. Carol was devastated that she missed her son becoming a teenager. Neighbors had been trying to reassure her and keep her hopes up, but she was starting to give up. A police car had been stationed outside her home, but even they couldn't spend any more resources without any new leads. It's a cool fall afternoon, and out of nowhere, Jackson walks through her front door. He was wearing clothes that were several sizes too big for him, like a little kid who was playing dress up with his daddy's suit. Despite the oddness of his appearance, Carol's nightmare was finally over as she rushed to embrace her son. In the days and weeks that followed, the police never did get much out of Jackson. He tried to assure them that there was no sexual abuse and that his kidnapper treated him very well, but he never revealed the name of said kidnapper. The only hair that was found on the suit Jackson was wearing matched Jackson himself. A few weeks later, the police would find an apartment that was rented in Jackson's name, filled with toys and other things that would have been perfect for a kid his age. They also discovered employment records at a nearby toy company, also in Jackson's name. The police interviewed the people at the company about this mysterious man, and they all thought that he was very odd, but at the time they thought that he was completely harmless. During his tenure at the company, he was quickly promoted, but left suddenly during a pitch meeting, which just happened to be the same day that Jackson returned home. To this day, that man has not been found, and this kidnapping remains unsolved. If you have any information and might know what film this crime appeared in, reach out to me on Threads or any social media where I am at Bubbawheat. Or you can email me right here at realcrimescenes@gmail.com, and that's real spelled R-E-E-L. If you're the first person to guess correctly, I'll give you a shout out on the next episodes. And remember, this isn't true crime, it's real crime scenes.